Welcome to episode 23 of the Party Wagon podcast. I'm your host, Brendan, from the YouTube channel Brendan's Rambles. And Eric is not going to be here on the cast for the next handful of episodes. It's just going to be me flying solo. So please bear with me. I know it's not going to be as interesting with just one guy, but he can't be here for the next few casts. So it's just going to be me. So I guess I'll just dive right into Turtles news. There's not a ton to talk about. There's definitely product news to talk about and new news. There's probably some I'm not thinking of or didn't notice. My bad if I forget to mention anything. But before I jump into news about any upcoming Turtles products, I'd like to just kind of do a little segment of, Super 7 screws up again. I don't know. I'm not trying to just dump on Super 7. And no, they didn't really do anything new bad, but I finally got Genghis Frog in the mail, the Super 7 Ultimates. It's a great figure. He looks cool. He looks great. The wash on him looks really good. They usually don't do that kind of thing, so I'm glad to see a wash on him. But I put him up on my top shelf of Super 7 where I have all my surfer characters. I had Mike the Sewer Surfer and Ray Fillet. And I put him there to finish out these surfer characters. And when I was putting him up there, I took off the other figures and cleaned the shelf while I was doing that. And suddenly Ray Fillet's weak hips just, they really started acting up. And I started noticing how weak they were. And he just couldn't stand straight. His legs would just slide out from underneath him. And he just kept falling over and taking all the figures off the shelf with him, knocking off Fish Sticks, knocking off Mike. I was shocked nothing broke, but eventually I got him in a good pose where he wasn't sliding anymore, didn't seem to be sliding, and I got all three of the figures up there. And for days they looked fine. And then this morning I come home from work and I find that every figure that was on that shelf is down on the floor. Genghis Frog's tongue is broken off, and Ray Fillet's entire leg is broken off. And it's broken off at the peg because they put these weak little pegs on the joints. So it never breaks where it just pops out of the socket like it does for a lot of other toy brands. You can't pop these joints out of the sockets. They just break the joint. So yeah, that's like a $60 figure just broken now. That's like two $60 figures. I bought Genghis Frog from Big Bad Toy Store, and I love Big Bad Toy Store. It's the best place to get modern toys, but they throw a lot of extra money onto each toy with fees, shipping fees, all that kind of stuff. So you end up paying a lot of money. I paid $63 for that Genghis. They basically designed that site where if you're not buying in bulk, you're getting ripped off. Which is part of the reason why I got my Premium DNA Battletoads from Premium DNA, is because even without all the extra fees, they were listing them for like $10 more expensive, I believe, on Big Bad Toy Store than they were on the actual Premium DNA site. And I know I'll probably get them sooner on Premium from Big Bad Toy Store, but I don't need them that soon. Like, I got them already, and actually they're awesome. I'll talk about those in a bit. But yeah, I spent $63 on a figure, and in not even a week, it's broken. I can super glue the tongue back on. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do about Ray Fillet. That's really a bummer. I love that Ray Fillet figure, but now it's just a broken piece of garbage in my room. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it. I could just glue his leg on and he'll just be stuck in one pose for the rest of his existence. And I'm really, really getting sick of having to do that with figures. That happened to my Super 7 Foot Soldier. That happened with my Super 7 Leonardo, Sewer Samurai Leonardo. Like, that's just happening a lot. And it's basically just reaching a point now where it's like my Super 7 collection is more or less just a bunch of broken garbage. Like, it's just a bunch of scraps and pieces of broken toys. They're not even actual toys. They're just broken toys. And that's getting pretty annoying because those are the most expensive action figures that I collect. And we're going to be talking about new toys versus old toys today as the main topic, specifically like the original vintage Playmates TMNT versus NECA and Super 7. But yeah, Super 7, they just, I do like their products, but they never cease to annoy me. There's always some reason why Anytime I get new Super 7 figures, I love them, but there's always a but, and it's a pretty big but. But also, I mean, a lot of complaints I have with Super 7, when I recently got the premium DNA Battletoads figures, which these are awesome. These are really nice figures. I kind of realized like they don't have a lot of the problems that the Super 7 figures have. A lot of the stuff I complain about in the Super 7 figures, and honestly, even some of the NECA figures, is better on these premium DNA ones. Like the paint deco is so clean. I think on my Porka Pig, the black around the eyes is a little sloppy, but everywhere else the paint is like laser clean. The colors are very vibrant. They pop. There's a good wash and dry brush on everything that really brings out the sculpt. I think Super 7 is like sorely missing a lot on their sculpts. And for the most part, the joints are really nice. They're fluent. They don't get stuck. They're very easy to just pose right out of the package. The alternate parts like heads and hands just pop right off and pop back in. I've always had so much trouble with alt heads on action figures. Premium DNA had the most seamless changing of alt heads I've ever seen for action figures. It just pops off and pops on. They also put the knob on the head and the hole on the neck, which I've never seen before, but I have to say it actually worked really well. The only issue I have with them is that they have the same weak hips that Ray Fillet had. They have really weak hips. And I know for the Toads, it's like, you know, they're buff everywhere, but you know, they have very lean, thin muscle on the bottom half of their body from the waist down, and then from the chest up, they're gigantic. So I know they're very top heavy figures. And the Porka Pig, he does have weak joints in the legs, but they're not anywhere near as bad as the Toads. But I still just feel like these action figure companies need to beef up the joints in the legs and the hips more. Like they need to realize that that's the support for the entire figure. So you really need to put like stronger joints in there, tighter joints in there. It's just NECA gets it right. I've never really had weak hips on a NECA figure, but Super 7 and apparently Premium DNA, you get those problems all the time. But yeah, these Premium DNA figures are great. And I kind of can't believe with how many accessories, humongous, insanely well painted, dry brushed accessories that you get with the Toads. They're the same price as a Super 7 Ultimate. They're about the same size, same quality of figure, if anything, a little better. And then you get like massive accessories, like accessories the size of another figure. Zitz in particular comes with this big, like, you know, bulldozer arm that is bigger than the actual figure. And they don't raise the price on those on him from Rash. And they're extremely well stacked with accessories. But then Porka Pig, who doesn't come with any accessories, it's like 30 something bucks. They down the price so much for him. So it just seems like Premium DNA, you know, as much as people complain about them, this is my first time getting figures from them. But as much as I hear people complain about them, and I have my complaints about how the company was run in the past, I don't know, their product seems pretty solid and their pricing seems better than Super 7. Again, I just feel like other toy companies are constantly exposing Super 7 for, you know, BSing about prices, because I can't see how these Battletoads with the insane amount of gigantic accessories that are fully painted, and again, they have washes on them and everything. They have all kinds of deco on them. I can't see how that can be the same price as a standard Super 7 figure, but then Super 7 Scumbug is as expensive as he is. So to me, it just seems like Super 7's making up prices. And I noticed, we were saying this was probably going to happen, Robotic Rocksteady, now that he's available, he costs way more than he used to. He costs about as much as Gorilla now. He's a really expensive figure. I mean, if you buy that on Big Bad Toy Store alone, like without other figures, it's probably going to be damn near $80. Like, it's probably going to be like $78 or something with shipping and everything. So yeah, Super 7, man. I don't know. really getting hard for me to stay excited about that toy line. And I like the way the Genghis looks. He looks really cool, but it's starting to get to the point where the looks aren't enough. The products are just too faulty. They're too crappy. They don't even stand up. They break so easily. They're made out of very brittle plastic. By the way, they're falling on carpet. I have carpet in my room. It's not like I'm taking these things and throwing them on hardwood floor as hard as I can or something. Like they're falling on a nice, pretty plush carpet. So they really shouldn't be breaking as easily as they are. I don't know. I'm sorry, Super 7. Again, I have nothing against Super 7 personally. But I'm getting pretty sick of their crap. To be honest, like it's getting really hard to defend them. It's been time and time again now, but whatever. Premium DNA, very excited about these Battletoads. I only got Rash, Zitz, and Porka Pig. I wasn't getting the big figures. I never really played Battle Maniacs, so I really just played the NES game as a kid. So I don't care about like the skeleton thing. It's cool, but I don't need it. And then General Vermin and General Slaughter, they're badass, but I have no real connection to those characters. I think they were in the NES, but they didn't really look like that in the NES. And I never got that far as a kid either. I got that far when I got older. I just don't have room for them or the money for them also, but they're really cool. If I did, I'd probably grab them. They're badass. Yeah, so I only got the first three. First game figures. Zitz, I kind of wish he was that like tan, brown, goldish color he was on the NES. He's like this cool green, and actually he looks really nice. I really like that figure. The colors, the weird kind of yellow they use, the kind of off yellow they used for his belly and face. The way that contrasts with the bluish green, and then he's got that like dry brushing on his chest. It just looks really cool. The colors look really nice next to each other, and that's probably what he looked like in the arcade game and Battle Maniacs and stuff. But I kind of wish he was the more brown color that I know him as. But I think Pimple is going to be that color because I believe, and I could be wrong, I think in the promotional material, Pimple was the brown one and Zitz was the cool green one. Whereas in the actual game, they flipped it on the NES. I'm trying to remember like the stupid cartoon pilot that they made back in the day. I believe that's what they looked like. Yeah, whenever they make Pimple and whenever they make the Dark Queen, I'll definitely get them. That's what I'm waiting for in Wave 2. I really want Pimple and the Dark Queen. The little vulture guy, I'll get him too if they make him. And that's really all I need. I don't need any more. But getting these gets me really excited for other premium DNA toys. Now I'm like, I kind of need those Earthworm Jim figures. Now I really want those Earthworm Jim figures. And I'm very excited for the Clay Fighter figures now. As I said on this podcast before, I loved Clay Fighter 2 as a kid. I'm so hyped they're making Bad Mr. Frosty and apparently other characters. So seeing how well these turned out, these Battletoads turned out, it gets me very, very excited for the Clay Fighter figures, because Clay Fighter characters have such wacky, zany proportions, sort of like Battletoads characters. I mean, Tiny kind of looks like a human version of a Battletoad to a certain degree. So I'm pretty excited to see how well those turned out. Like, it just gets me hyped to see how good the Clay Fighters are going to turn out, especially since they're all being based on the original sculpts from the games. And I really hope we get some Clay Fighter 2 characters. I really hope we get like Nanaman or Hoppy or something. I don't know if we will. It'll probably mostly be Clay Fighter 1. That was like kind of the one people are most nostalgic for. I don't really care about 63 and a third, but I wouldn't say no to those sculpts because characters like Hungin and the Zappy Yow Yow boys and stuff just look awesome, and they'd make really cool action figures. So I'm down for anything. I really would like Clay Fighter 2. But yeah, premium DNA so far, except for the really, really weak hip joints, which I really don't like. Aside from that, I have nothing but thumbs up for that company. Not necessarily how they ran it in the past, but just as a company that makes products based on their products and their pricing, thumbs up from me. 2 thumbs up, good job. Hey guys, just a side note, I didn't become aware of this until after I recorded the podcast, so I figured I'd throw this in there. I couldn't put it in on video with my setup and everything, but for anyone listening with just the audio, it won't make a difference, and for people watching the video, you just won't get any video for this quick little blurb. But on the topic of Super 7, have some more potential bad news for the company. On Big Bad Toy Store recently, they've been having insane sales on Super 7 products recently. Like, most of Super 7's products have been dropped significantly in price. You can get some of the Turtles Ultimates as low as $19. And it stings a little bit because, I bought all those things for $55 or $45 when they were cheaper. And now you can get them for under $20. I feel like kind of a sucker now, but it's cool. I mean, hey, you want to army build foot soldiers, this is the time to do it. I'm not quite going for Ray Fillet because he's higher. I think he's $27.99. So like with tax and all that, I'll end up with over $30. And my sweet spot right now is kind of like $20. If he drops down to $19, I'll grab him. But for now, I just kind of have my Ray Fillet propped up on his severed leg to make it look like he's standing, and I have him like not on the shelf he used to be. He's like down on the floor, like on a floor level shelf in my room. But yeah, I don't know. While that's really cool that everyone now can kind of even more easily collect the Super 7 line if you've fallen behind or missed stuff, it kind of sucks because it kind of makes it seem like this company is really on its last leg. It just seems like they're very desperate and they just need to move these products because they did not make the money off of them that they were expecting. And it seems like they have more products than they know what to do with them. So they're really just getting rid of these things. I mean, I think places like Big Bad Toy Store pre-ordered a bunch of these action figures when they were new. And I guess they just haven't sold them all. I guess like people just aren't buying these figures. Word of mouth about all the problems and stuff and the high price point. I think people have just not been buying them. So either marking them down and doing these sales will be good for Super 7 and get more people into the line. But I think more realistically it means Super 7 ain't doing so hot. And they just got to move products any way they can. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Super 7. I don't know exactly what this means for the company. I don't know if this means the end is nigh. I don't know if this has nothing to do with them because, it's Big Bad Toy Store selling them. I'm assuming Big Bad Toy Store already bought these figures. So it might just be, Big Bad Toy Store's clearance, essentially, and has nothing to do with Super 7. They might not be dealing with this money because, the store might have already bought these figures from them. They're essentially already sold them. Or, I don't know, maybe, these are going to then be shipped from Super 7 to Big Bad Toy Store, and they are just marking them down because Super 7 needs whatever money they can get. I don't know. Either way, I'm assuming it doesn't really signify anything good for Super 7 because if all their premium high-end products that normally go for over $100 are being marked down to the price of a dinner at a diner, I don't think they're doing so hot. I think they're a little desperate. And as much as I dump on Super 7 sometimes on here for their flaws, I am in no way rooting against them. I do not want to see this company crumble. I want to see them get better, if anything. I want to see them improve the things I complain about and stick around and continue to make really awesome action figures because they do make really awesome action figures. If they died, that would be really sad. They have a lot of cool licenses, and I've really liked what they've done with Turtles so far, so I really hope they aren't just dying, but being totally honest, I think they are. And I wouldn't be surprised if an announcement comes within a year from Super 7 or maybe 2 years that either they're shutting down or that they're massively downsizing their company, which has kind of already come out because they've had to publicly cancel so many waves and so many licenses and stuff that it's been pretty obvious they haven't been doing very well. But I think this is the final confirmation. So we'll just see. Again, unless they never say anything publicly and they just keep putting out figures, then I guess they're fine. But we'll see, I think, in about the next year where the future of Super 7 lies. But now we're going to leave the action figure space and we're going to move into the video game space because, as I've brought up on this podcast before, there's an Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 coming out. Or no, it's out, I believe. It is out. Yeah, it came out. I think so. Or am I wrong? I don't know. It's either coming out or it's out. But they've shown off the first wave of DLC characters now. And even though I'm not going to play this game, probably, I don't think I'm going to get it. I got the first one. I was not thrilled. I know they're supposed to be updating a lot of stuff, adding some more abilities to make it play more like actual Smash Brothers. I'll just play Smash. Like, I still like playing Smash. I don't really see any reason to play the Nickelodeon one, unless someone makes a platform fighter that somehow surpasses everything about Smash Ultimate. I don't really see a reason to play any other one. Like Smash Ultimate's perfect the way it is. But I'm still interested in what's going on with this game because it's an interesting premise. The idea of mascot platform fighters is kind of just inherently interesting, just to see like who gets in and all that. I know there's rumors of like a Disney one coming out or whatever, but the new news is in the DLC pack, they added a bunch of characters for franchises that already have a ton of characters. And people are mad about that, even though those are by far the most lucrative franchises represented in Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. But we're getting Rocksteady. And he looks really cool. He looks like Rocksteady from the 87 cartoon, like to a T. But there's just some problems with that. One, how do you have Rocksteady without Bebop? Now, I could be wrong about this. Maybe he has an alt costume where he's Bebop. Like half the costumes are Rocksteady and half of them are Bebop. I don't know. I think that would work. They basically do the same attacks. They use guns, they use knives, they charge you. Like they basically do the same things. So I think it could work. But I don't know if they will. If they don't do that, that's going to be very weird to have Rocksteady without Bebop. That's like having like Butthead without Beavis or like Bill without Ted. Like there's just duos that you can't split up, and Bebop and Rocksteady are one of those. And then also we lost Leonardo, Michelangelo, and the Shredder. So now our Ninja Turtle representation in the game is Raph, Donatello, April O'Neil, and Rocksteady. And that is some weird representation. I've heard some people say Rocksteady's a weird choice, that like he's too insignificant. But if you're going 87 Turtles, Rocksteady is not a weird choice. He's one of the major characters. So I don't think that's true. It just seems weird to have him and not Shredder, Leo, or Michelangelo. I think they probably are planning to bring back all the old characters at some point, because that would be very weird to do that, to like say, oh, this is the better version of the game. We improved everything. We acknowledge the old one was not very good, but then act like you should still own the old one if you want to play every character. So I think they will bring them in at some point. It's just a matter of having the time to do that. But all this really makes me want is an actual standalone modern Ninja Turtles fighting game. They already have the models for Leo, Mike, Shredder, and then even from the background, they have Mondo Gecko and a Foot Soldier and Krang. Just take all of those and the new characters in the new game, put them all in a fighting game, and then, just start adding essentials like Baxter Stockman, Bebop, Rat King, Leatherhead, maybe the Punk Frogs, make it like each alt costume is a different Punk Frog, or each Punk Frog gets 2 colors or something. Just start adding, just make a Turtles fighting game, because I don't think they really fit in with the Nicktoons, especially the retro 87 Turtles, which were not a Nickelodeon cartoon at all. It just doesn't work. I think the world of TMNT is too big, and if you're going into it to the point where you're going to characters like April O'Neil and Shredder and Rocksteady, not just the four turtles, I feel like you're opening that sewer lid and just letting all those characters out, and there's just too much to that franchise to not put a bunch of those characters in. You just want to see all those characters together. Once you get Rocksteady, you're like, okay, now I want to see Baxter. So I don't think a lot of the Nickelodeon Nicktoon ones are like that. Like, I think, they added the Angry Beavers. I don't think anyone's going to be like, we need more Angry Beaver characters. Like, they're good as representation for that cartoon. But Ninja Turtles, there's so many characters who are all action figures we all played with as kids and stuff. So they're just it's a very popular ensemble cast. And I just feel like by putting in those other characters other than the Turtles, you're really just making Turtles fans want more. And it's annoying the people who just want Nicktoons because they're sick of Turtles characters taking over the whole roster. And it's annoying the Turtles fans because it's not a Turtles game. So I really think they should just make a Turtles fighting game. It doesn't even have to be a platform fighter. It could just be a tournament fighter or something. But regardless, either one, just make a new Turtles fighting game. Take them out of Nick Smash or Nick Brawl, whatever the hell it's called, and just put them in their own game, because it's for such a huge ensemble cast of characters, it's ridiculous they haven't done a proper fighting game. They did like Smash Up and Tournament Fighter, but those rosters were pretty lacking. So, I mean, it's kind of surprising we haven't even gotten like a He-Man fighting game. I mean, Masters of the Universe. There's so many characters with so many interesting abilities in these franchises. It's kind of weird we haven't gotten them. We had like multiverses where you could play as LeBron James, famous Warner Brothers character LeBron James. You're putting LeBron James in a platform fighter, but then we can't play as all these characters who are more or less designed to be in fighting games. So it's kind of funny. I don't know. Just felt like Rocksteady's addition to Nick All-Star Brawl was worth mentioning, even though no one's probably even going to play that game. I'm sure some people will. I'm probably crapping on it too hard, but I guess there's still a scene for the first game. I haven't heard from it. I heard a lot of buzz when it was first coming out, and then it just kind of fizzled out and disappeared. Not as bad as Multiverses. Multiverses was like so much buzz and then nothing, and they stopped supporting the game and everything. But yeah, I just stick to Smash personally.
This is April O'Neil, Channel 6 News, and you're watching the Party Wagon Podcast.
All right, so that was one heck of a short news segment. Sorry when it's just me. I can't make it go on quite as long. This is probably going to be a significantly shorter podcast than the usual ones. I know my last solo podcast was like an hour and a half. Let's see if I can even reach that with this one. This might end up only being like an hour or something, but let's see how far I can stretch this. So today's topic is one that I believe Eric's already made a video about this on his channel and talked about this. I've never really talked about it. It's the idea of retro action figure collecting versus new action figure collecting. Which one is better? And I don't think there really is a clear answer. And I'm not just going to go into which one is better to collect, because that's all a matter of preference. I'm going to weigh the pros and cons of just them as action figure lines as a whole. So I'm going to look at the vintage Playmates 1988 action figure line, and I'm going to look at the NECA and Super 7 modern action figure lines. And I'm going to kind of look at the pros and cons of each of them, see which one's better, just kind of go over my experiences with them. I'm not going to go too into detail about my childhood experiences with the vintage line. If you want to see that, go to my channel, Brendan's Rambles at YouTube, and just I have tons and tons of videos giving detailed personal experience memory videos and reviews of every single unique character action figure in that line. I'm not going to do that here, but I'm going to lightly touch on that because nostalgia plays a big part in all of this. So I guess without any further ado, I'll jump in and just let's take a look at the 87 toy line now, or 88 toy line. I'm sorry. We've done this before. We've talked about this toy line a lot on here. So again, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of this toy line or anything, but I'm just going to look at basically what was good about it, what was bad about it, what I loved about it as a kid. Objectively, I've said this a million times, the best sculpts of the day. Like Playmates was making better sculpts than any other toy company. When those came out, those were just, they blew everyone away because action figures were all very samey before that, or you had, like LJN was doing the wrestling and Thundercats figures that were very chunky and very kind of awkwardly shaped. Especially, I feel like the more human the character was, the more awkward they looked. The more detailed ones like Vulture Man or Slithe looked really good. But then when you saw like the actual cats like Lion-O and stuff, they looked really weird. They had kind of like these fat necks and their heads looked like little knobs and stuff. And they were just very weird looking. They definitely weren't there yet. But yeah, they were fun. They were big chunky figures. But Turtles sculpts just blew all the other ones out of the water. And they just kept getting better and better with each wave. By the time we got to, 1990, those sculpts were some of the best action figure sculpts for, just regular retail kids action figures, not collector action figures that we ever had. I think even to date, those are some of the best sculpts we've ever had. You go into a kid's toy aisle now, and the sculpts are not that good. They're good, but they're never as impressive as like what Playmates was doing in 1990. And all of Playmates stuff was pretty damn impressive. Like the Toxic Crusaders were really impressive at the time too. Yeah, sculpts were just beautiful. Those were just amazing sculpts, and the paint was always never as good as the sculpts because they had a limited budget. You could see in the production pictures, like in Chris Fawcett's book, Rad Plastic, that they had so much color on them. Like every little detail was painted. And obviously in the final release, they couldn't actually make them look like that because that would have cost a fortune. So you had ones like Hothead who had so much deco on him in the production shot. And then in the actual action figure, he was kind of lacking. But for what they were, they put a good deal of paint on them. I was very hard on it as a kid. I remember really hating how underpainted some of the figures were, especially as they got more detailed and more of those details weren't painted, which as a kid, I didn't think about. Like, oh, well, that's so much more paint you have to pay for and apply onto a figure. I was just thinking like, why is there less things painted on these action figures? But the paint was pretty good. I mean, the paint for most of them is better than most modern action figures. Most modern action figures have very little paint on them. Like again, kids action figures, not collector action figures. But yeah, they had a lot of paint on them. They had some interesting like designs, interesting deco also. Like I always hated how Dr. L, the back of him was all gray. Like there's no excuse for being that ugly, but at the same time, he had that really cool wash on him that made it look like his human skin was like skin tone was kind of blending with like the elephant skin tone, and it looked really cool. They did stuff like that a lot. That kind of plussed them, made them look special. I don't know. Yeah, they just looked really good. Physically, I don't think there's really any complaint. They had better articulation than most toys at the time. A lot of kids' action figures had 5 POA. I mean, even in like the 2000s, I remember seeing commercials for like Spider-Man toys and Fantastic Four toys and stuff. And they would say like 5 points of articulated action. And it's like, wow, Turtles had a lot more than that usually. A lot of them had waist swivels. A lot of them had, elbow joints and wrist joints and stuff. And they had a lot more than just the usual, not a lot more, but they usually had more than the 5 POA. And they had those very dynamic poses, which made them look more fluent than other figures. Other action figures looked very stiff at the time, especially the Kenner style. I guess today you could call it the reaction style. But that Kenner 5 POA style, where they're just these stiff guys just standing like they're bathroom signs, like they're like the guy on the bathroom sign. They're just these stiff figures that just stand straight up and stare straight forward, and that's it. Turtles were so much more dynamic than that. I think He-Man kind of pushed it a little bit. They retooled, they reused the same parts so much that it got redundant and the poses all looked the same anyway, but they definitely looked more fluent and more dynamic than the other stuff that was on the shelves at the time. But Turtles pushed that to like a whole new level. And yeah, the Turtles action figures just looked so much better than anything else that was out at the time and posed so much better than anything else that was out at the time. Also, they used those bright ass colors, those neon colors that just caught your eye, made it look like something more fun, more premium. They always did like interesting action features with a lot of characters. It's something I kind of took for granted when I go back and look at that action figure line and see how many of those figures had action features. I always forget how many action features they did. But they did a lot of them. And like in each wave, I would say at least half of them had action features, probably more. And they were always trying something new with the action features, whether it was throwing a basketball into a hoop or, you know, having a skateboard you could ride on, or having the character talk, or having the character spin on their shell, or just even having the character's eyes bug out when you pop something on their head. And there was just so much variety, even stuff that wasn't really action features, even stuff like, you know, Walkabout has these totally different articulated legs and knees than anybody else to get poses that no one else can get that fit the kind of creature he is. There's just so much uniqueness from one figure to the next. Whereas something like Masters of the Universe, I love that toy line, and they definitely tried to get more experimental with that stuff as it went on. But action features aside, those figures are all pretty much exactly the same. They did have a lot of action features, though. I will give them that. But then you also have stuff like, you know, Thundercats by LJN, where the action feature usually just consists of lifting their arm up and down or lifting both arms up and down. They weren't the most creative action features. Whereas Turtles were always trying to do something new and fresh and crazy and just off the wall, like tossing pizzas or something. So they definitely get all the praise for all of that. They were innovators. They were amazing to look at. They were very premium for the time, very well put together, well painted, well sculpted, well articulated, well presented. Their packages were all unique with unique artwork on them for most of the years. They were very premium. They were, for the time, they felt like we were getting collector figures, almost like these are a cut above the rest of the action figures. So they were, they broke the mold. They were better than the norm. What I loved about the figures was all the insanely unique, dynamic character designs, the crazy sculpts, the crazy colors, what weird creatures would pop up in each wave, and if I'd see them in the cartoon show and stuff. Like there was definitely a big link to the cartoon and the action figures, and even like the video games. Even when I play the video games, I'd always want to see my favorite action figures show up in them and stuff. So it definitely did a good job, that toy line, of building this cast of characters and really making you want to see more and more characters and more of those characters. That was like a real strength of that toy line. And yeah, it's honestly really what kind of made it last as long as it did. Not only was it the premium quality of the toy line definitely made it last a long time, but also just like the frenzy around the franchise at that time, that it so well advertised the cartoon and other products, and the cartoon and other products so well advertised the toy line. So a lot of people always say that the 87 cartoon is just a toy commercial, which if you go back and watch it, it's definitely not. There's way more episodes that do not promote toys and just have random gangsters and stuff in them than there are ones that promote toys. Not saying that there weren't ones. There were definitely episodes with little toy commercials, snuck in there, but it was not the sole purpose of every episode. Most of the episodes were just fun cartoon episodes. But something people don't acknowledge is how much the action figure line was a commercial also, because it's sort of like, to use a different franchise, it's sort of like Pokemon. You play the video game, you like all the new monsters, then you watch the anime to see those new monsters appear. They get ratings, they get, views. Then when you get really into all these new Pokemon, then you want the cards of them. You want to go collect the card game. Then you want little action figures of them, whether those be the old Tomy ones or the more modern. I guess Jack's Pacific makes the new ones. I actually don't know. Maybe Bandai. But yeah, you're going to buy all this stuff. You're going to buy plushes. You're going to buy all this Pokemon stuff. Each gen is like that. I mean, they release each game like 2 or 3 times just to make most people are just going to buy every version of it and trade within them. They're not going to trade with friends. So like it is just a giant cycle. Like it's just a big wheel of advertising. And that's basically what Pokemon does. Every product advertises the other products. Even if it doesn't come right out and say in the game, hey, go collect the Pokemon card game. It doesn't tell you that. But just by existing and making these characters interesting and something you want to see more of, that already is making you want to buy things like the card game and action figures and stuff, because you just created something that people want to see more of. And they know how to present it that way. They make collecting every Pokemon feel very special. They make it seem like that's like a mission you need to want to do. I remember even back in the day, like their slogan was "Gotta catch 'em all." The whole show was like, I gotta be the very best. I gotta, catch them all. That's my goal or whatever. So it's like they were always pushing that idea of like, you need everything Pokemon. You need every Pokemon in everything Pokemon. And that's pretty much what Ninja Turtles was like back in the day. It's like, oh, you love the cartoon show? Well, you can own toys of all these characters. Oh, you love the toys? Well, you can see them in the newest video game. Oh, guess what? There's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie in theaters now. Go see that. And they all just, advertised each other. And then there was movie figures and like just all these tie-ins, and every asset of the fandom was like promoting, or not the fandom, every asset of the IP was promoting the other assets. And they didn't even have to mention it. Like, they don't have to say in the cartoon show, Raphael doesn't turn to the camera and wink and say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles now in theaters by New Line Cinema or anything. Like, they didn't have to do that. They just know if you like this cartoon and you like these toys, you're gonna go see this movie. So yeah, I don't think the advertising of just straight up showing a toy and saying this is a new toy is as common in the cartoon as people think. But the advertising across the whole franchise was just very big. And that's something that action figure line was very, very good at. If I got a new wave of those action figures, I was extra into Turtles. I wanted to see new episodes. I wanted to see like a movie come out. I wanted to see a new video game come out and stuff with all those characters. And often they did that. I mean, after the wave 4 came out with Ground Chuck and Dirtbag and stuff, they released like a year later or something, the Manhattan Project with Ground Chuck and Dirtbag in it and stuff. So they were definitely aware of that, and they were using that to their advantage. And that was probably, I know people say like you were a sucker, that they were just using you, but honestly, that's some of my happiest memories with the franchise, is how well the toy line promoted the rest of the franchise. Now, for the bad things, it's hard for me to say, because obviously I have nostalgia goggles. I grew up with this toy line. I love it to death. I'm not going to see as many flaws as some other people might see. I don't really see many. I guess you could say the unpainted accessories is a flaw. I don't know. But even then, the sculpts on the accessories were crazy, and every now and then you randomly got a painted one. But yeah, I guess the biggest flaw you could say is like where the line fell apart, and we've discussed this before. But there comes a point where all they're making is turtle variants. The turtles dressed up as this and dressed up as that, and it just got to be overwhelming. And we weren't getting as many unique characters. We weren't getting as much stuff that was new and exciting and like pumped a new life into the franchise. Like even when we were getting other characters that had been in the cartoon for a while, like Kala and Dask and stuff, it just they weren't characters that were getting people excited. There came a point where the toy line really lost its direction. And you can even see that in a lot of the unreleased action figures. There was stuff like that Were Tiger, Were Cat, April O'Neil, which I don't even know what that was supposed to be. It was like kind of based on the Wolfman. I think it was more based on Cat People, which is a movie by RKO. It wasn't even part of the Universal Monster cycle, so I don't know why they were considering that part of the Universal Monsters wave. But they were just making all this weird stuff, these like weird variants of like main characters from Turtles. And I really think the franchise was just losing its way. And a lot of us were falling out of it. I didn't care about the Turtles as trolls or the Turtles as Star Trek characters as a kid. Yeah, I think that's really the biggest flaw is that they got too big for their britches, but they ran out of steam. They ran out of ideas. They definitely were just in a state where they didn't know what to do with it anymore. For whatever reason, I've covered this before too, the cartoon stopped promoting the new characters for the action figure line. So we weren't seeing like Scale Tail show up. We weren't seeing King Lionheart or Monty Moose or Dr. L or Half Court, Sandstorm, Hotspot, Scratch. None of those characters showed up in the cartoon. So it really just reached a point where I think they were like, well, why are we making up these new characters if they're never going to be promoted elsewhere in the franchise and all? So it had just reached a point where I think that whole thing I was talking about, the whole cycle of advertising was falling apart. Movie 3 was not well promoting the franchise. The action figure line was not well promoting the franchise. And the cartoon was even like not sure what it wanted to do with itself anymore. So I really think that that's the biggest flaw with the vintage toy line is it got too big and they didn't know what to do with it. But again, that happens to everything. So it's not that big a flaw. But it's the biggest flaw I can think of. Again, I have a bias because I love this toy line. It was my favorite thing as a kid. But that's the biggest flaw I can think of. But now let's compare it to the modern ones, NECA and Super 7. So the first thing I talked about for the vintage line was the sculpts and how good they were. And NECA and Super 7 have some very good sculpts. I think the Toon line for NECA, the sculpts are they're serviceable. They're good. They look like the characters, but they're not going to impress anybody. They're not like the vintage toy line where you look at all that crazy detail and insane character design and it blows your mind. They're very simple. They're very plain figures, not in a bad way. It's hard to call something plain and make it sound not bad, but they're not the most like eye-catching figures, I guess. They're very simple. They're very smooth, very void of detail. But when NECA wants to, they can do very well with detail. If you look at their movie figures have insanely good detail, insanely good deco. They have like a gritty wash on everything to make it look really textured, and it just looks really good. Super 7, like I've mentioned earlier in this video, they have really good sculpts. I mean, you have the 4 Horsemen sculpting it, but the paint is always kind of lacking. They usually don't use a lot of dry brush. They don't usually put a wash on anything. They don't really bring out the sculpts that much. I feel like that's something that's lacking is a lot of the sculpts would look a lot better if they just hit it with a wash or something. A great example is Leatherhead. He has all this texture on his jacket and on his scales and everything, but his jacket is just like macaroni and cheese colored, flat yellow, and his skin is just flat green. And I really feel like not only should he have a wash to bring all those scales out, all of the texture of the scales, but I really feel like some of those scales should have different colors the way an alligator does. Because I get the vintage figure didn't have that, but these are supposed to be plussed versions of the vintage figures. And there was a lot of plussing to be done for that Leatherhead figure. The only reason they made like so many characters just flat colors in the vintage line is because they were limited. They only had so big a budget if they're selling this toy for $3 or $4. Whereas when you're selling this thing for $60, you should be able to put a lot more effort into that. And I think the paint is really lacking. When you get a Universal Monster or movie turtle from NECA, and they're like, $35 to $40, and they have insanely good paint and deco and texture and everything. And then you get a Super 7 figure that's $20 more, and it has crappier paint, flatter colors, less deco. It's a little disappointing. It makes you wonder where the hell the money went. And I never felt that way. I never feel that way about the vintage line now. Back in the day, I thought they were skimping on things like Dr. L and all. But looking back at it now and thinking about how cheap those figures were and how much came in a package with each figure, it's really impressive they were able to do the colors that they did, the paint jobs that they did. So I would say, honestly, it's kind of hard to say because it's like, I think NECA does more with their paint than the vintage line did, mostly because they can, because, they're more expensive, bigger figures. But Super 7 is so far in the other direction that it kind of balances it out and probably puts the Playmates line a little above the modern ones. If you're going to do it a three-way battle, Super 7 loses for sure. And if you compare like for a kid line and a collector line, what they're able to do, I'd say NECA and Playmates Vintage probably meet somewhere in the middle. There's probably a happy medium. But Super 7 just fails. And articulation. So the modern figures, NECA has pretty good articulation. They reuse a lot of parts, especially in their earlier figures. Some of the joints can get very stuck. I've had some problems with stuck joints on a lot of figures before, especially, again, the earlier ones. But generally, the articulation's pretty good. Like I said, premium DNA swapping parts is very easy. For NECA, swapping heads has always been a pain in the ass for me. They're always really hard to get back on. I think my Vernon, his head still isn't on properly. On my Rat Vernon, I believe Rat Vernon, his neck is still kind of floating in there. It's not fully on the ball. It's just really hard to connect them sometimes. And yeah, getting tails on. Oh my God. If a character has a tail, which for some reason usually has spikes on it, that is going to rip your hand up trying to get that thing on. But yeah, in general, the articulation's pretty good. It scrapes the paint a lot on a lot of NECA figures, which is a shame. They really clump on the paint with NECA. They really pile it on. Again, especially with the Toon line. But the articulation's pretty good. You can get some great poses out of NECA figures. Super 7, on the other hand, Super 7's posing is extremely limited. And the best way to show this is with not show, I'm not going to show you my toys, but the best way to describe this is with the foot soldiers. So the NECA foot soldier, one of them I was able to get in this insane sprawled out squatting pose where one leg is shooting almost entirely horizontally to the side of him. The other one's bent real tight. Then one hand is sticking straight down, rested on the ground, and the other hand's up holding a weapon. I tried to get a similar pose out of that with the Super 7 foot soldier, and you can't even get close. He more or less just has bent knees. And they're not even like 90-degree bends. Super 7 figures have really limited articulation. Of course, it's different for each figure, but in general, it's really hard to get good poses out of them. I think the turtles actually are some of the most easily posable characters in the line. You have characters like Leatherhead, and it's like you really can't even do much with that figure. Like he's gonna always basically be in the same pose. You can like move his arms around and like turn his head. That's about it. So yeah, Super 7 definitely, again, for how much you're paying like $60 a figure now, because with shipping and everything, it basically comes to $60. That's just that's not worth it in my opinion. I just see the vintage Playmates figures having, almost as much articulation sometimes. And they were $4. So I think like Anthrax, like you think he has his neck articulation, he has his mandibles on his face, his antennae, he had 4 arms. I believe at least one of them has wrist articulation. He has articulated legs. His what is that? His thorax, whatever, like the bug butt in the back, like the ant butt, that's articulated. Like that guy has a lot of articulation on him. And he was like what, $4 or $5 depending on where you got him, whereas now you're spending $60+ on a figure. They don't have that much more articulation. I will say though, I was surprised that Genghis had a chest cut and he had like chest articulation, because they haven't done those in the Turtles line yet. I believe there could be 1 or 2 that have them that I'm not thinking of, but in general, the torso is usually a solid piece. It doesn't look so bad on him because it's covered by his jacket and everything. Sometimes I think those cuts can look really bad. Again, on the Battletoads, they look really good. They're like naturally sculpted in with the musculature, so you don't even notice it's a cut really. And they actually have a lot of range on the Battletoads ones too. But for the Super 7 ones, I don't know if they would look good because they're such detailed sculpts, and they're based on the Playmates figures that didn't have chest cuts, so they weren't designed to look good with chest cuts. So they might not look right on all figures if they're going that direction. Now, I still don't have Space Raff or the robotic Rocksteady. I'll be getting those at some point, probably not soon, because I'll probably just wait for them to go on sale on Big Bad Toy Store. Right now, I just bought Mario Wonder, and I'm going to be buying the Mario RPG remake. So it's like I'm going to be spending a lot of money on video games, on Mario games this month. So I can't be spending as much on action figures. But at some point, I'll get those. I don't think they'd have chest cuts, at least not the Raph is the Space Cadet. But yeah, articulation on Super 7, to put it lightly, it stinks. It's pretty bad. You can get some good poses. I feel like Mondo Gecko, his limbs are a little well posed. The skinnier figures are a little easier to pose. Well, with the exception of the foot soldier. But NECA definitely has the much, much more dynamic posing, the much better articulation of the two companies. So again, it's kind of the same thing. Like the Playmates one is so good for its time. NECA is pretty good for its time, and Super 7's terrible for its time. So it kind of ends up where the Playmates one is better. Pricing, I don't even need to go into detail. NECA has pretty good pricing for most of the figures. Some of them are a little ridiculous. Some of them do not feel worth the price. But so then some of them are very good. Like again, those Universal Monster Turtles and stuff are like $35. That's a great deal. Super 7, terrible pricing. I almost never feel like I'm getting what I paid for. Even though I love the way a lot of those figures look, I just don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth. And also, by the way, I was talking about earlier how my Rightful Life fell off the shelf and it broke his leg and stuff, and how it's happened to so many Super 7 figures. My NECA figures go just as high as the Super 7 ones. They've fallen a bunch of times, like all the NECA Toon and movie figures, and that almost never happens for them. Off the shelf, like onto the carpet, there's been times where they've broken in otherwise, but I don't think any of them who have ever fallen off the shelf onto the carpet have ever broken, honestly. They're definitely not that bad where like a whole joint just breaks off, like a whole limb just breaks off. That happens for Super 7 very easily. That doesn't really happen for NECA. I know I've always said that NECA has like brittler plastic. I think I'm starting to agree with a commenter we got once who said we were dead wrong about that. I think you're right. I think Super 7 has more brittle plastic. It feels less dry and brittle than NECA's to the touch, but it's weaker definitely because they break. Maybe it's just because the limbs and stuff are heavier on Super 7 figures. It's putting more weight on that little joint when it hits the ground and it breaks it. But the NECA figures do not break as easily as the Super 7 ones do. Super 7 figures break if you just look at them the wrong way, especially Wave 5, the one with Ray Fillet, Leatherhead, Krang, and Leo the Sewer Samurai. That set, that wave was just like made out of like styrofoam. I don't know. That was the weakest wave of Super 7 by far. I've had a problem with almost every figure in that wave. I think Leatherhead is actually the only one I haven't had anything break on him yet, because Sewer Samurai Leo, his elbow broke. Krang, his little tripod body seat for the other body, or the other Krang, I should say, broke. And now Ray Fillet lost a leg. Leatherhead has really weak legs, like really weak hips. Like he sinks down a lot when you stand him up because he's too top heavy. So he might fall off and break at some point. I mean, if he falls off, that fishing rod is snapping in half. I can already see that happening. But so far, fingers crossed, nothing's happened to my Leatherhead. Everything else from that wave has broken in some way. So, you know, each wave is like almost $200. When you're spending, actually, I think that wave was over $200. When you're spending over $200 on 4 action figures and 3 of them break, like, and you're not playing with them, right? You just put them on a shelf and they break. That is very disappointing, and that makes you not want to collect the line anymore, really. The vintage ones, like you had to try to break them. I remember there was a point where I was an idiot in like when I was like 20 or something, and I was like recollecting the line, and I remember getting Splinter. And my brother and I were like chucking him around at the hardwood floor trying to break him, like because we thought it'd be funny because we lost the robe, so we said he was useless. We just get a new one with the robe. So we started smashing it. I was a really, really, really fun 20-year-old, I guess. And we beat the crap out of that Splinter, and he would not break. Like the paint wasn't even chipping off of this guy. Super 7, you look at them the wrong way, and they just fall off a shelf and blow up. So I take such good care of my action figures now, and they break all the time. Whereas, you know, when I was, these figures from when I was a kid, like I'd beat the crap out of my toys as a kid, and they would not break usually. It was very rare that a toy would break. I'd have to like manually take a leg off and throw it somewhere and then never find it or something like that. That would have to happen in order for me to break, quote unquote, break an action figure. The only one I can think of that genuinely broke when I was a kid was Usagi. I broke his ears off of the first one we had, but it was like intentional. Like I was like 5 or no, I wasn't even. I was like 3, I think. And we were all of us kids were going to bed at night, and I broke his ears off. He started laughing and said he was a chipmunk or something. It was like on bald Usagi. That was like intentional. And even then, when I got older, I felt that I'm like, I don't even know how I ever did this. These are so pliable. I guess I was stronger as a 3-year-old than I was as like a 20-year-old or whatever. But yeah, it was the price you're paying for these new figures is just too much. And even then, you know, I am blowing a lot of rainbows up NECA's butt, but you know, I've had a lot of QC issues with NECA, and I've had a lot of figures break. A lot of accessories have broken. A lot of their accessories are very weak and brittle. Leo's swords have broken. Bride of Frankenstein, April's microphone broke and everything. Like a lot of their accessories break. My rock soldier, his like knuckle broke off because he fell over on a desk once. And, I've had a lot of problems with NECA figures, but again, that being said, like my Rat King from NECA is on pretty high shelf. He falls off all the time, and he's never broken even a chip of himself off. But in general, I would say with how much they break and how faulty they are and how much you're paying for them, you can't beat the price of the vintage. Now, if we're talking modern collecting, we'll get into that in a bit because, what you're paying for the vintage figures now is quite a bit. So we'll get into that in a bit. Right now, let's just keep talking about the basic pros and cons. I guess the last one we'll talk about, it's what we talked about with the vintage line, is how well do these promote the franchise? And I don't think they really do, if I'm going to be honest, because the NECA ones are being made for fans of the movies from the 1990s or fans of the 87 cartoon show. Super 7s are being made for fans of the vintage toy line. And they're really just catering to that fan base, and that's it. They're not really, promoting Mutant Mayhem or Rise of the TMNT or any of the other stuff that's been out while these action figure lines have been running. So they're really not cross-promoting the franchise much. I would say there's some cross-promotion with like NECA's Toon line and like Shredder's Revenge and, even like Nick All-Star Brawl with some of the vintage stuff in there. I like I said, if you see the render of Mondo Gecko from the first Nick All-Star Brawl, you can clearly tell that they copied the Toon figure of Mondo Gecko because they didn't realize it. They put like the dark green on the back of his arms and legs, which is just how NECA does like cell shading for the Toon figures. And that's not actually a detail that's on Mondo Gecko. So they clearly just looked at the NECA toy and sculpted what they saw in in a, like Blender or whatever. But yeah, they really don't do any job of promoting the franchise. They're really just in this like nostalgia bubble. And, they do what they have to do, but I don't know how good they are for the Turtles brand. Me and Eric say a lot that we think Turtles is like bigger than it's been since the 90s now. And that might be true. But I do think the problem is that you do have all these different versions of the Turtles. And we were saying before that like we think that different versions can help promote the franchise and make it bigger. Like back in the day, we had so many different versions. But I do think the problem is there is literally no synergy between them. Like back in the day, sure, the action figure version or the Archie version or the cartoon version of characters were all greatly different from each other. But we were seeing those same characters and they were recognizable as the same characters, and for the most part. And, they were kind of coming out around the same time, same characters being seen in the same places. As a character is big in going to show up in the cartoon show, you can find them on toy shelves at KB and Toys R Us, which apparently Toys R Us is going to start coming back in the US. I know in Canada they never went away, but I hear we're going to get like 24 new locations, which that is awesome. I can't wait to be able to walk into like a real Toys R Us again. And I know we've had like the part in Macy's that's Toys R Us, and I know the American Dream Mall in New Jersey has like a little Toys R Us, and it's like a legit Toys R Us, but a big Toys R Us warehouse, like a real deal Toys R Us. I can't wait to walk around one again. But anyway, the new ones really don't get that. They really don't promote what's happening. Like whatever's coming out in the new Super 7 wave, which I mean, they can't even plan because those come out at such random times. But whatever 4 characters come out, they don't promote like, what character is showing up in a video game now or something, or who's showing up in the IDW 87 comic line or something. it's just random Turtles nostalgia at random times. Nostalgia for different things, nostalgia for the toy lines, nostalgia for the movies, nostalgia for the Mirage comics, nostalgia for the 87 cartoon. It's just all over the place. It's just randomly thrown out nostalgia for whoever wants it. And nothing is really keeping the Turtles brand as like a solid brand, I think, these days. And it's not NECA or Super 7's job. That's not what they set out to do. That's not something they should even worry about. It's not their franchise. But it is kind of a shame. You would think that Viacom would want most assets of the franchise to be serving some sort of purpose to promote something. Again, even if it's just the IDW comics or a video game, or even if it's like, when they're airing the 87 cartoon show on Nickelodeon now. So it's like maybe when they get to the season that has, Wingnut and Screwloose and Mondo Gecko, they're going to want action figures of those guys coming out to like kind of promote it, almost like redoing the 90s all over again. But they really don't. There's really no synergy with the rest of the brand with these action figure lines. There was some cross synergy unintentionally early on. Like they were both doing Muckman and Mondo around similar times and stuff, but that's really just accidental. But yeah, I think definitely the Playmates line wins there because that's what it was designed for. So no competition for that. But now we're going to talk about modern collecting of both lines, because you can't go back to 1989. You can't go buy those vintage figures when they were $3, $4. If you want those figures now, you're going to pay a pretty penny. If you want Antrax now, especially you want him with all his accessories and not having his antenna broken off, you are going to be paying a lot of freaking money. So in that sense, for someone who has no nostalgia or just very light nostalgia for the vintage line, but thinks it's a cool line and wants to collect it, I would honestly say it's not worth it. As much as I love that toy line, I'd have to say I don't think it's worth it, because these figures just cost so much now. Each one is kind of an investment when you get to a certain point in the line. And even the cheaper ones, the ones that used to be like $10 are now like $40, $30 or something. The cheapest they go is really like $30. That's expensive. I mean, with how many figures there are, especially if you're getting all the turtle alts and stuff, like that is an expensive toy line. That is a deep, vast toy line. There is a lot of stuff. If you're getting accessory sets and vehicles and play sets and all the weird variants, like the mini play sets, the little what was that called? Mighty Max, little Mighty Max Polly Pocket kind of things, or the turtles that transform into fire trucks and crap. If you're getting all of that, that is one hell of an expensive toy line. That's actually way more money than collecting the entire Super 7 line. I mean, by the time you collect the whole Super 7 line and have on display, about half of them will be broken. You'll have to rebuy them anyway. But even then, it's probably cheaper. Even like buying the Super 7 line twice is probably cheaper than getting half of the vintage line. And if you're looking at it through modern eyes, so someone buying the vintage line today, unless you're buying the re-releases that they're putting in Walmarts and Targets that are like $10, which is a great deal, by the way. Crappier paint and everything than the old ones, definitely like less paint, like, Bebop's shoes are all black like his pants in the new one and stuff. It looks like crap, but it is the vintage figures. If kids just want to play with those, you can get them at Target and Walmart and have fun with them. They're great toys. But if you're a collector and you want to collect the vintage line, you're not getting collector figures. You're getting vintage figures. And most people who want to collect them probably know that already, but you might be a little disappointed with what you get because you can't really pose them. They're really already in their own poses. They're small. They're very tiny figures. Not a ton of articulation. Again, great articulation for the day, the time they came out, but by modern standards, no, you're not going to be able to do a crazy display with them. They're going to be pretty static. So I think for that, I think some modern collectors might be disappointed when they shell out like $100, $200 for an action figure from the vintage line, and it's just a static little 4-inch tall thing that's half painted. That's probably going to piss them off. That's probably going to, at some point, they're going to feel like, why am I even doing this? Why am I even collecting this line? I never feel that way because I have so much nostalgia for that line. So if I want to save up and shell out some money for, like, Gatekeeper Rocksteady at some point or something, I don't feel like I'm wasting my money, especially since, I'm going to pay credit into a payment plan. But I can see how modern collectors who don't have as big affinity for the brand as I do, getting into it would feel kind of like ripped off by how much money they're spending and how little they're actually getting, unless they're a vintage collector and they're used to that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't really recommend getting too deep into collecting the vintage line. And it's really cool when you see someone who has almost an entire complete or a fully complete vintage line. But I do think that's something people shouldn't aspire to, because I mean, it's too vast. It's too deep. There's too much stuff in that line, and it's so expensive. And being honest, a lot of it is unnecessary. There's so many stupid things. Like, everyone obsesses over all the white jersey Slam Dunk and Don. It's like, dude, who cares? You can get the regular Slam Dunk and Don for probably $30. I don't know. I haven't checked how much he is now, but I didn't know about the white jersey one as a kid. I didn't care. And honestly, if you want to get it just because it's rare and you want to show off that you have a rare thing and you don't even think it's that cool, I don't think it's worth the money. Unless you just really, really think that basketball Don looks so freaking cool in a white jersey rather than a red one. If you really think that's the coolest looking thing you've ever seen in your life, go ahead, get it. But even then, you could just get the Super 7 one when that comes out, and it'll break in a week. But it'll be Don in that white jersey. If you think that's that cool looking, you can have that, and it'll be on your shelf and actually be bigger and easier to see. So, yeah, I think when it comes to collecting a modern line, I think it makes more sense than collecting the vintage line. And I know it sounds ridiculous coming from me because I'm primarily a vintage collector. These days, I do a lot more modern collecting, but my vintage collection is much more beloved than my modern collection. Like, I don't care as much about my modern collection as I do my vintage collection. But, I don't think it's really worth getting that deep into the vintage collection. I would say set a goal. Say, like, I want to collect, all the unique characters. Like, I've had people come to me with my Turtle Talk videos where I do each wave of unique characters and I talk about them. And for some people, I know that's become kind of an established setup. Like, some people talk about, like, oh, wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. I just really made that up. Like, there's some like bleeding into each other. Like, some of those don't properly count as a wave, but that's kind of how I always just classed them. But I have seen some people who like my videos have kind of been talking about them in those waves, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, I'll get some comments from people on those videos and say, like, oh, I've been trying to collect all the unique characters, basically all the characters that are in those 6 videos that I did. I did the Leo alts, but I'm just talking about the 6 unique characters. And they'll say, like, yeah, I wanted to get everybody from these waves, or I wanted to get every unique character figure from the first 3 or 4 waves or something. A lot of people don't go past wave 4. But yeah, set a realistic goal for yourself and just decide to collect that. And if you really like those and you really want more, then you can start adding more on. Then you can be like, let me get some of the unique characters from the Toon line. Let me get the unique characters from the movie 3 line or something. Let me get the, turtle alts from the first 3 years or some goal like that. And if you still are having fun, you're liking collecting all that stuff, then by all means, keep doing it. But I really don't think people should be jumping into I need to get a complete 1988 toy line because that's just insane. Like that's way too big a line. And as someone who freaking loves that toy line, I have to say it's not worth it. Yeah, just it's only worth it for the diehard collectors. When I say diehard, I don't mean someone who's mildly, serious about it. I mean like die hard, like you are obsessed with getting that whole toy line. But then Super 7, again, that's a very easy toy line to collect. It's honestly cheaper now than it is at launch because nobody wants those figures, so they get marked down a lot. So if you just want a really nice looking Turtles collection, the Super 7 line is honestly not too bad to go with. Like they're not cheap figures, but for not too much, you could probably get the whole toy line. And if you do it gradually over time, it's not that bad. And there's not that much. There's some chase figures, there's the neon glow in the dark ones. There's going to be like flocked Splinter and stuff. But in general, it's not a big toy line. NECA is very big, and some of them are really hard to find and very expensive on the aftermarket. But I do feel like in general, that line has been getting better and better and easier to collect. There's still those earlier figures that are tough, but even then, a lot of those ones like Casey Jones and Rat King and Vernon, they got like later re-releases. So it's not that hard a toy line to collect for. Even like the Turtles themselves have been re-released so many times. It's still hard. It's much harder than Super 7 to get that full set. But I think even if you don't want the full set, just to get a decent collection going, it's not that tough. So I would say, in all honesty, again, even though I like the vintage figures better, I think they have more long-term value. I would say, and I think they're better for their time when they came out. But I would say as far as modern collecting goes, it's probably better to stick with collecting modern figures than it is the vintage ones, because vintage toy collecting, I think, is for any brand really should be reserved for the diehards, the people who just really have a strong emotional connection to those products and just want all of them. I mean, I have an insanely strong emotional connection to the vintage toy line, which is behind me right now. I've made so many videos about it. I've talked about it so many times on this podcast. I love the 88 toy line. But even I have no desire to own the whole thing. There's so many figures in that line I don't care about. So, I think like when I say die hard, I mean like serious die hard. So, yeah, I would say, honestly, as much as I've bitched about them and as much as I've given them the lowest ranking of any of these toy lines, I would say the most sensible one to collect is probably Super 7. Because they're easy to collect. Don't put them on high shelves. Don't put them in dynamic poses. But that's a pretty affordable toy line, and they will look cool. Again, they're not affordable if you buy them new, but if you get them used on Big Bad Toy Store, especially when they start going on sale, or if you just go get you won't get them used on Big Bad Toy Store. If you get them for sale on Big Bad Toy Store, or if you get them used on eBay and stuff, they're pretty cheap, some of them, actually. You can get like the four Turtles and like the first few waves, you can get those for like probably like $30 now a pop. So yeah, I would say just collect the Super 7 line, honestly. And you could probably get them loose for like $20, honestly. So yeah, I would say modern is the one to collect over vintage for modern collectors. That's my final consensus. I think the vintage toy line is a better toy line for what it is in just about every feasible way. But I would say the modern ones are more worth collecting in this day and age. So, of course, I never have a straightforward answer of just this is the winner, this is the loser. They're both kind of winners in their own way. But that's the way I look at it. So, again, sorry, this episode is going to be way shorter than any other ones. I don't have as much to talk about. Again, there's probably Turtles news that's come out that I've not heard or forgot about. I've been, I guess, kind of like not down, I'm not depressed or anything, but just a little like bummed out that Halloween's over. Halloween's a big deal for me, and first week in November is always rough. Every year, it's always like kind of depressing that we have to wait a whole other 365 days for Halloween again. I just love the month of October. It's always sad when October's over. November kind of sucks until Thanksgiving comes along. But yeah, I haven't been as on top of turtle stuff. And then in October, I was watching so many horror movies and stuff and just doing all that. And I ended up not really doing much for Halloween on my YouTube channel. I did that one Stephen King video and that was it. I didn't put up any of the other videos that I thought I was going to make. I didn't make any of them. It's been too busy with other stuff in my life. I just haven't had time to make videos really, but I'll be doing the podcast for the next several episodes just as myself. I don't know exactly how long it'll be before Eric comes back, but I would say the next few episodes are probably just going to be me. So I'm sorry if I'm not the most entertaining solo host, but yeah, that does it. Catch you guys next time. Peace.